The Galactic Dominion had long dismissed Earth as an irrelevant backwater, a planet of primitives who barely grasped the basics of interstellar travel. Their soldiers wielded archaic projectile weapons, their armor was laughably crude, and their warships were relics compared to the Dominion's sleek, planet-killing dreadnoughts. For centuries, the Dominion had conquered countless worlds, crushing resistance before it could even begin. The idea that humans could pose a threat was not just absurd, it was amusing. The High Council chamber echoed with laughter as representatives from the Dominion's most powerful species reviewed intelligence reports on Earth's military. General Vor of the Krovax, a towering reptilian warrior clad in shimmering battle armor, flicked his forked tongue and grinned. These humans still rely on solid projectiles. They carry weapons that shoot tiny pieces of metal. How quaint. Across the chamber, the crystalline Zalari diplomat hummed with amusement, her translucent form pulsing with bioluminescent ripples. Their largest warships are barely a fraction of the size of our smallest cruisers. Their fleets are nothing but metal coffins waiting to be vaporized. Another burst of laughter filled the chamber. Even the cold, analytical AI of the synthetic collective chimed in, its emotionless voice calculating a probability. The likelihood of human resistance lasting beyond one planetary cycle is less than 0.0003%. The invasion plan was simple. The Dominion's fleet would descend upon Earth in overwhelming force. Cities would be leveled, their leaders executed, and their military obliterated before they could organize a proper defense. The war would be over before it began. No one, not even for a moment, considered the possibility of failure. And so, with the confidence of gods, the Dominion unleashed its fury upon the world of man. The first wave of the invasion descended upon Mars, where human colonies had been established decades prior. Dominion landing craft touched down on the red soil, releasing squadrons of cybernetically enhanced shock troopers. Their plasma rifles hummed as they scanned the horizon for signs of resistance. They expected fear. Instead, they were met with fire. From underground bunkers and hidden fortifications, human soldiers emerged with terrifying efficiency. There was no hesitation, no wasted movement, just immediate, calculated violence. Bullets tore through Dominion armor, striking weak points with surgical precision. Explosions erupted as well-placed mines shredded the first wave of invaders. The Dominion had vastly underestimated human warfare. They had assumed the battle would be fought on open fields, with direct engagements where superior firepower would guarantee victory. But the humans fought differently. They used the terrain, they ambushed, they adapted. And worst of all, they enjoyed it. A Dominion squadron attempting to flank a human outpost intercepted a transmission between human soldiers. They expected desperate cries for reinforcements. Instead, they heard laughter. "Hey Wilson, you see that big bastard with the glowing eyes? Took 3 shots to drop him. Damn lizard's got some armor." "Oh, well, try hitting the joints. They don't like it when their knees explode." The soldiers were joking in the middle of battle, as if the firefight was nothing more than a game. When the Dominion forces finally managed to retreat to their landing zones, they were horrified to find their ships already compromised. Human saboteurs had infiltrated their ranks, planting explosives and disabling critical systems. By the time the Dominion fleet realized what was happening, entire divisions had been wiped out. The Battle of Mars lasted a single Earth day. The Dominion had expected total victory. Instead, they suffered catastrophic losses. From orbit, Admiral Xylox, one of the Dominion's most decorated commanders, watched in stunned silence. This was not how wars were supposed to go. Every species the Dominion had conquered fell into predictable patterns. Surrender, despair, extinction. But not the humans. They fought with a relentless, almost suicidal determination. They did not break when outnumbered. They did not surrender when surrounded. They fought as if nothing else mattered. As if pain, fear, and death were mere inconveniences. The Dominion attempted a full-scale assault on Earth itself. Hundreds of warships descended into the atmosphere, deploying ground forces in every major city. But the moment they landed, they realized their mistake. The humans were waiting for them. Urban warfare had been perfected on Earth long before the age of interstellar travel. The streets of every city became a maze of death. Snipers picked off Dominion commanders from unseen perches. Homemade explosives turned every alleyway into a death trap. Civilians, mere civilians, took up arms, fighting with the same ruthless efficiency as trained soldiers. A squad of Dominion warriors trapped in the ruins of a collapsed skyscraper sent out a distress signal. The only response they received was the eerie, static-filled voice of a human soldier. "You lost, buddy?" Then the building exploded. The Dominion's technological superiority meant nothing. Their armor was strong, but humans learned where to strike. Their energy shields could deflect plasma, but not a well-placed tungsten round through the eye socket. Their war machines were powerful, but human ingenuity found ways to bring them down. And then there was the worst part. The humans laughed. Even as the sky burned with Dominion fire, even as entire cities were reduced to rubble, they did not stop smiling. Their soldiers cracked jokes in the middle of battle. They taunted dying Dominion warriors, mocking their last words. To the Dominion, war had always been a solemn affair. A conquest was a calculated process, a means to an end. But for the humans, war was something else entirely. It was sport, and they were very, very good at it. The horror of the situation fully dawned upon the Dominion when they intercepted a human transmission from a high-ranking officer. General Vasquez, a grizzled veteran with a scarred face and tired eyes, was addressing his troops. His voice carried over the battlefield, calm, composed, almost amused. "Listen up, you ugly sons of bitches," he growled. His words aimed not at his soldiers, but at the Dominion forces listening in. "You thought we'd be an easy fight? Thought we'd roll over and beg?" There was a pause, then a chuckle. "You have no idea what kind of hell you just walked into." The message was broadcast across every Dominion frequency. It was not a plea for peace. It was not a declaration of defiance. It was a warning. By the time the Dominion fleet finally withdrew, abandoning their conquests, they had lost more soldiers in a single campaign than in the last 1,000 years of expansion. The High Council, once so confident in their inevitable victory, now sat in stunned silence. Their greatest military minds could not explain what had happened. The AI of the synthetic collective, which had once calculated Earth's defeat as a certainty, now struggled to process the data. The humans were not the most advanced species. They were not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most resilient. But they were something far worse. They were relentless, and they were laughing. The Dominion's retreat from Earth was not celebrated by their people. It was not seen as a strategic withdrawal nor a temporary setback. It was, simply put, an unmitigated disaster. The Empire had spent millennia crushing civilizations, expanding its influence across the stars without ever suffering a true loss. Now, for the first time, they had encountered something they could not understand, could not defeat: humanity. In the core worlds of the Dominion, news of the failed invasion spread like wildfire. Fear crept into the hearts of species that had never known fear. The Krovax warlords, who had once mocked human frailty, now whispered among themselves about how their best warriors had been outmaneuvered and slaughtered. The insectoid Tharquan, who believed in absolute efficiency, could not comprehend how a species as chaotic as humans had adapted so quickly to Dominion tactics. Even the cold, synthetic intelligence of the AI collective could not process the madness they had witnessed on the battlefield. The humans had not fought like soldiers. They had fought like something else entirely, something unpredictable, something ruthless. It had been expected that, once the Dominion deployed its overwhelming force, Earth would surrender. Perhaps they would resist for a time, their leaders making desperate speeches about freedom before ultimately submitting, as all species had before them. Instead, they had met fire with fire, turning their planet into a graveyard for Dominion forces. And they had done it with a smile. Quote, "If left unchecked, Emmons became a valueless good. A captured Dominion officer, one of the few survivors taken prisoner, was brought before his superiors for questioning. His once pristine armor was dented and scorched, his scales dulled from battle, his hands trembled. This, too, was something new. Dominion officers did not tremble. "What happened?" the council demanded. "You were leading one of the primary ground forces. You saw them up close." The officer swallowed, his throat dry. The memories clawed at his mind. Fire, blood, and laughter. "Hey, they don't fight like anyone else," he whispered. "They should be afraid. They should be afraid, but they're not. They talk to each other during combat, they joke, they insult us, even as they bleed, even as they die." One of the council members leaned forward, their mandibles clicking in irritation. "That is irrelevant. They were supposed to be weak. Their weapons are primitive, their bodies fragile, their numbers are nothing compared to our forces. How did they win?" The officer exhaled shakily. "Because they never stop. We cut them down and more come. We crush them and they crawl forward anyway. Even when we have the advantage, they do not stop fighting. We were trained to break the will of our enemies, to use fear as a weapon. But fear does not work on them." The council chamber fell into silence. The words spoken by their own soldier confirmed what they all feared. The humans were different. On most worlds, the Dominion had established control by targeting key infrastructure, neutralizing military leaders, and demonstrating overwhelming force. Civilizations submitted because resistance was futile, but the humans did not think in terms of futility. They did not measure wars by logic or calculations. To them, war was something else entirely. By addressing the life of the galaxy and sharing on its coins, ideally we forced the world to become feudal. It was personal. And the worst part? The war had only just begun. The Dominion had assumed that, after repelling the invasion, humanity would return to their isolated existence. They were wrong. Earth had not simply defended itself, it had declared war, and now the humans were bringing the fight to them. The first attack came in the form of something the Dominion had never experienced before: psychological warfare. It began with a transmission, broadcast across Dominion-controlled space, overriding every security measure as if it had been designed by the Dominion's own engineers. The screen flickered to life, and there, standing in front of a battlefield littered with the remains of fallen Dominion soldiers, was a human. A soldier clad in battered armor, his rifle slung across his chest, his expression one of quiet amusement. "Hey there," he said casually, as if speaking to an old friend. "Heard you guys had a rough time on Earth. Real shame about that. I mean, you came all this way just to get your asses handed to you. Must be embarrassing." The council watched in stunned silence. The broadcast was not one of diplomacy, it was not a demand for surrender, it was a taunt. The soldier gestured to the wreckage behind him. "Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, those humans got lucky. We'll just regroup and come back stronger. And hey, maybe that's true, maybe you will. But here's the thing." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "We're not waiting." The screen changed. It showed Dominion outposts along the outer rim, burning. Warships drifting in space, their hulls breached, supply lines cut, trade routes disrupted. The humans weren't just holding the line. They were pushing forward. "You wanted a fight," the soldier said. "Well, congratulations, you've got one." The transmission ended. The Dominion realized too late that they had made a grave mistake. The humans were not content to defend themselves. They were coming. Dominion fleets scrambled to respond, but they were not prepared for the way humans waged war. They did not launch grand armadas or announce their attacks with honor. They struck from the shadows, appearing where they were least expected, tearing apart defenses before vanishing into the void. A Dominion colony world, once thought untouchable, awoke to find human soldiers already among them. They had infiltrated the planet under the cover of darkness, using stolen Dominion codes to bypass security. The first sign of attack was not an explosion or an alarm. It was laughter. Dominion officers, stationed in their high towers, heard it echoing through the streets. A quiet chuckle, a mocking whistle. By the time they realized the humans were there, it was too late. They moved through the city like ghosts, striking down soldiers in the dead of night, planting explosives in key structures. The Dominion forces tried to retaliate, but how could they fight an enemy that refused to fight conventionally? By morning, the once thriving colony was a wasteland. The humans left behind a single message, scrawled across the remains of the Dominion Central Command building. Tag, you're it. Panic spread through the Dominion like wildfire. They had been the ultimate power in the galaxy, an empire that could not be challenged, and yet these humans, these laughing, reckless, impossible humans, were not only resisting, they were winning. A final emergency council meeting was called, attended by every major leader of the Dominion. The question was no longer how to conquer Earth. That possibility had long since vanished. The question was how to survive. The synthetic collective, the AI intelligence that had once predicted human defeat with absolute certainty, now spoke with uncharacteristic hesitation. Recalculating strategic probability of Dominion survival, it intoned. Current estimates, unknown. Unknown. The word sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. The Dominion had always existed in absolutes, victory or defeat, order or chaos. But now, they were faced with something that defied calculation. The humans did not fit into their equations. They did not follow the rules of war. And worst of all, they were laughing. The Dominion had always believed itself invincible. For millennia, it had crushed rebellions before they could begin, turned proud civilizations into obedient vassals, and rewritten the history of entire species, erasing their past and assimilating them into its vast, unchallenged empire. Its strength had never been questioned, not by its subjects, not by its enemies, and certainly not by itself. There was no force in the galaxy that could oppose it. That was before the humans. The war had shifted in a way the Dominion had never anticipated. It was supposed to be a single, overwhelming strike, an invasion that would last days, perhaps weeks at most, ending with Earth's complete subjugation. Instead, the Dominion had been forced into a retreat so humiliating that it was spoken of only in hushed whispers. And worse, the war had not ended with the withdrawal. It had only just begun. The humans had refused to remain on the defensive. The moment they had repelled the invasion, they had taken the war to the Dominion's own doorstep. Fleets of human warships, crude and outdated by Dominion standards, appeared in systems once thought unassailable. They struck supply lines, sabotaged military installations, and crippled vital hyperspace relays, severing key communication networks. The Dominion had prepared for planetary sieges, for space battles fought between massive armadas exchanging fire in open combat. But this was something different, something insidious. They came like ghosts, appearing where they shouldn't be, attacking without warning, then vanishing before the Dominion could mount a response. Entire fleets were lost to ambushes, their ships hacked apart by human commandos who somehow knew exactly where to strike. The Dominion had expected to face an enemy bound by strategy, by tradition, by fear. What they faced instead was an enemy bound by nothing at all. On the Dominion-controlled world of Vorexia Prime, a critical military hub, the occupation forces had gone on high alert after reports of human infiltrators had surfaced. Security was tripled, surveillance drones scanned every sector, and entire districts were locked down under curfew. The humans had been spotted in the city, but they hadn't yet. That was worse. The Dominion soldiers patrolling the streets spoke in low voices, their normally rigid discipline shaken by something they could not explain. It was not the sight of the enemy that frightened them. It was the waiting, the knowing. They had seen what had happened on other worlds. They had seen the aftermath, the burned-out fortresses, the empty barracks. the blood-stained corridors where entire garrisons had vanished overnight. They had heard the recordings, the distant, unnatural sound of human laughter in the middle of a massacre. For 3 days they waited, 3 days of silent, unbearable tension. And then, on the 4th day, the laughing began. At first it was only a whisper of sound, barely audible over the ambient hum of the city's power grid. But then it grew louder. It echoed through the empty streets, through the narrow alleyways and towering buildings, surrounding the Dominion forces from every direction. It wasn't natural. It wasn't right. It was too calm, too casual, laughter that should have belonged in a place of joy, not a battlefield. The soldiers gripped their weapons tighter, their training struggling to override the primal fear crawling up their spines. Then, the lights went out. The city plunged into darkness as power grids failed in a synchronized collapse. Automated defenses went silent, communications were cut, every failsafe, every redundancy, every single measure the Dominion had put in place to prevent such an event had failed. Not by accident, by design. Then the first explosion ripped through the central barracks. A fireball consumed the building, sending debris and bodies flying into the air. The shockwave was followed by another explosion, then another, then another. The Dominion forces scrambled to organize a defense, but they couldn't even find their enemy. The humans were in the shadows, moving unseen, cutting through squads with brutal efficiency. A Krovax commander, his hardened scales usually unshaken by combat, found himself pressed against a crumbling wall, gripping his plasma rifle so tightly his claws dug into the metal. He could hear the screams of his soldiers in his earpiece. He could hear the sound of rapid gunfire, of bodies hitting the ground. And beneath it all, the laughter. "Where are they?" he snarled into his communicator, demanding answers from his remaining officers. "They're everywhere," came the panicked reply. "We can't see them. They're—" The transmission cut off with a sharp burst of static. The commander turned, scanning the darkness, his enhanced vision picking up the movement of his own troops running through the city. They were disorganized, frantic. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. He caught a glimpse of something, a shadow moving between ruined buildings, a flash of steel, a red glow from a weapons targeting system. And then he saw them. The humans didn't march in formation like Dominion soldiers. They didn't move with the rigid discipline of a structured army. They moved like hunters, like predators. Their armor was battered, mismatched, customized with strange markings and symbols that had no meaning to the Dominion. And yet those weapons cut through Dominion troops like they were nothing. One of them turned to look at him directly, their face hidden behind a dark visor. For a moment the commander thought he saw something unnatural in the way the human tilted their head, as if they were enjoying this. Then the human raised a hand, mimicking the shape of a gun, and mouthed the words, "Boom." The explosion took the commander before he could react. When the fires finally died, when the last remnants of Dominion forces on Virexia Prime had been wiped out, the humans left behind another message, a simple phrase scrawled in Dominion blood across the city's central plaza. Still laughing? The psychological effect of the human war effort was unlike anything the Dominion had ever encountered. Species that had once bowed in fear to their rule were now rising up in rebellion, inspired by the impossible defiance of Earth. Dominion forces found themselves not only fighting humans, but fighting insurgents who had once been their loyal subjects. Entire planets that had surrendered without resistance now armed themselves, their people emboldened by the knowledge that the Dominion was not invincible. The war had become something new, something worse. The synthetic collective, once so certain of its calculations, now struggled to process the data flooding its networks. It had predicted a 0.0003% chance of human victory. Now, it could not calculate an outcome at all. The High Council, once the rulers of an unchallenged empire, now sat in grim silence. They had unleashed war upon the humans, believing it would be swift and absolute. Instead, they had invited something into their empire that they did not understand. A nightmare that could not be stopped. Reports continued to flood in, more Dominion worlds falling, more fleets destroyed, more recordings intercepted of human soldiers laughing in the face of death, of making jokes as they charged into the heart of battle. The Dominion had conquered countless species, believing themselves to be the ultimate force in the galaxy. But now, for the first time, they faced an enemy that did not fight for survival, for conquest, or for power. The humans fought because they wanted to, and that made them the most terrifying enemy of all.